Some stories begin with tragedy, others begin with mystery, but sometimes they begin with both. Months ago, the body of a young woman named Celeste was discovered inside the frunk of a black Tesla, a discovery so disturbing it immediately raised more questions than answers. Since then, people connected to the case have been questioned, arrests have happened, and the internet has searched endlessly for the truth. Yet somehow, the biggest question still remains. How did this happen? And why does it feel like justice still hasn't come? Tonight, we take a closer look at the mystery surrounding Celeste and the questions that refuse to go away. They vanish without warning. Lives are shattered, yet the world moves on as if nothing happened. Some stories refuse to fade, echoing long after the headlines disappear. In Season 2, we dig deeper, uncovering the hidden truths behind the whispers of the taken. The unanswered questions in the death of Celeste. There are moments when a story surfaces that stops people in their tracks. A story so unsettling, so deeply disturbing, that the only word left in its wake is one simple question. Why? Why did it happen? Why has it not been solved? Why does it feel like justice is moving at a crawl while a family waits for answers? The death of Celeste, discovered inside a Tesla connected to rising musician D4VD, has left behind exactly that kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that hangs heavy in the air. The kind filled with doubt, frustration, and questions that refuse to go away. And months after the discovery, the biggest question remains: why has no one been arrested? A discovery that shocked the public. When news first emerged that a young woman had been found dead inside a Tesla connected to a rapidly rising music artist, it immediately captured public attention. The story spread quickly online. Social media exploded with speculation. True crime communities began dissecting every available detail. But beyond the noise and speculation was a much more painful reality. A family had lost someone they loved. Behind every headline, every trending hashtag, and every viral post was a life that had been taken too soon. For those who loved Celeste, the tragedy was not entertainment or internet drama. It was devastating and permanent. And for them, the passage of time without clear answers must feel unbearable. David's boyfriend gets arrested in Montana, testifies in front of grand jury. For months, the case seemed to exist in a strange state of silence. Questions were everywhere, but answers were almost impossible to find. Then something happened that suddenly shifted the entire conversation. One of D4VD's close friends, known publicly as Neo, was arrested in Montana. The arrest immediately caught the attention of people who had been following the case closely. Until that moment, much of the discussion had been built on speculation and scattered details. But when someone connected to the situation is suddenly taken into custody hundreds of miles away, it naturally raises new questions. Why Montana? Why now? And what information might investigators have uncovered that led to that arrest? Soon after, reports began circulating that Neo had testified before a grand jury connected to the investigation. That detail alone sent shockwaves through online communities following the case. Grand juries are typically used by prosecutors when they are evaluating evidence and considering whether criminal charges should be brought. Almost immediately, online discussions exploded with a new theory: that Neo may now be cooperating with investigators. Some observers began suggesting that his arrest and testimony could represent a turning point in the case, the moment when someone on the inside might finally start talking. Whether that is true or not has not been publicly confirmed, but the timing alone has fueled intense speculation. In many criminal investigations, authorities focus first on individuals they believe may have knowledge of events before moving toward larger charges. Sometimes those people face legal pressure of their own, and sometimes in an effort to protect themselves, they decide to cooperate with investigators. If that is happening here, it could explain why the case has remained so quiet for so long. But again, that brings the public back to the same frustrating question that has surrounded this case from the beginning. If someone close to the situation has now been arrested, and has reportedly testified before a grand jury. What does that mean for the rest of the investigation? Does it mean investigators are getting closer to the truth? The internet begins asking questions. We live in an era where information spreads faster than ever before, but we also live in a time where speculation spreads just as fast. When news broke about the discovery connected to the Tesla, the internet did what it always does. It began investigating. People searched for timelines. They looked through social media posts. They analyzed lyrics, photos, and comments. Some claimed they found suspicious details. Others insisted the speculation was unfair. But through all of it, one constant remained. The public kept asking why no one had been charged. Why had there been no arrest? Why had investigators not announced more details? Why did it feel like the case had gone quiet? When online moments raised new questions? For a long time, much of the public conversation around the case felt frozen in place. There were questions everywhere, but very few new developments. The investigation seemed quiet, and for many people watching from the outside, it felt like the story had stalled. But then something else began to happen online. A woman who many people had pointed out looked strikingly similar to Celeste, someone who had previously appeared supportive of D4VD, began posting content that seemed noticeably different in tone. At first it was subtle, small comments, vague statements, posts that some viewers interpreted as distancing herself from him. Then over time, the tone appeared to shift even more. What once looked like support started to feel more like separation. People following the situation closely began to notice the change, analyzing posts, comments, and interactions for clues. Around the same time, another moment from earlier in the timeline began circulating widely online. In a clip from a live stream recorded before Celeste's body was discovered, viewers pointed out a moment where a strong smell inside the vehicle was mentioned. During the stream, D4VD appeared to explain the odor by saying it came from him using the bathroom earlier, claiming he had taken a poop roughly 2 hours before. At the time, the moment may have seemed insignificant, but after Celeste's remains were later discovered in the Tesla, that clip took on a very different meaning for many people watching the case unfold. Online communities began replaying the footage, debating what it meant and whether it had any connection to the later discovery. In today's digital world, even the smallest moment can suddenly take on enormous significance once new information comes to light. A comment on a live stream, a deleted post, a cryptic caption, a sudden unfollow. These details rarely go unnoticed. And in a case already surrounded by unanswered questions, those small moments can quickly grow into major talking points. Some observers began wondering whether the changing tone from people once close to the situation, combined with clips from past streams, suggested that the story might be shifting beneath the surface. Of course, without official confirmation, no one truly knows what these online moments mean. Social media can be misleading, and isolated clips rarely tell the full story. But perception matters. And when behavior online begins to change, people inevitably start asking questions. For many watching the case unfold, it felt like yet another signal that something behind the scenes might be changing. Another moment that added to the growing sense of mystery surrounding Celeste's death. And once again, it left the public returning to the same question that has echoed since the beginning. What is really happening here? And perhaps even more importantly, when will the full truth finally come out? David unlikes and deletes posts. In today's world, social media is more than just a place to share photos or music. It is a digital record of behavior, a timeline of what people support, what they react to, and who they choose to surround themselves with online. And sometimes those digital footprints begin to change. Observers who have been closely watching the online activity of D4VD claim they have noticed a pattern developing in the months following Celeste's death. Posts that were once liked have reportedly been unliked. Accounts that once appeared on his following list have quietly disappeared. People he once seemed connected to online are suddenly no longer there. To some, those actions might seem insignificant. After all, people adjust their social media activity all the time. Likes are removed, follows change, online circles shift constantly. But in a case surrounded by unanswered questions, even the smallest online change begins to draw attention. People who have been tracking the situation say the activity has become increasingly noticeable. A gradual reshaping of an online presence that once looked very different. Posts disappearing from the liked section, connections fading, digital interactions quietly erased. And when those changes begin happening after a major tragedy, people inevitably start asking questions. Are these normal social media adjustments? Or is someone attempting to distance themselves from certain conversations, people, or moments that now carry more weight than they once did? Of course, social media behavior alone proves nothing. Online actions can be misinterpreted easily, and there are countless reasons why someone might clean up their digital footprint. But perception matters, especially in an age where every post, every like, and every follow becomes part of a much larger public narrative. For those already questioning what happened, the changes only deepen the mystery. Because when the digital trail begins to shift, people start wondering whether someone is simply moving on, or trying to erase pieces of a story that the internet has already begun to remember. If you're enjoying the video so far, please take a second to like and subscribe. It's a huge help to the channel. Thank you. Now back to the story. David becomes prime suspect, then nothing. For a moment, it seemed like the investigation might finally be moving forward. Reports began circulating that multiple individuals connected to the situation had been questioned by investigators regarding the death of Celeste. Detectives, as they often do in cases like this, appeared to be speaking with people who may have had knowledge of what happened in the hours and days surrounding her death. When investigators begin interviewing people close to a case, it often signals that they are trying to piece together a clearer timeline. Who was there? Who spoke to whom? Who might know something they have not yet shared? As those interviews reportedly took place, public attention once again turned toward D4VD. In the court of public opinion, many observers began describing him as a central figure in the investigation, someone whose name continued to appear whenever the case was discussed. For some watching the situation unfold, it began to feel like the case might finally be approaching a turning point. If investigators were questioning people, if new information was being gathered, then perhaps an arrest was coming. Perhaps the truth was finally about to emerge. But then, just as quickly as the conversation intensified, it seemed to fade again. No major announcement followed, no public charges were filed, and once again the case appeared to slip back into silence. For many people following the story, that moment was deeply frustrating. It felt as though the investigation had taken a step forward, only to suddenly stop again. The interviews raised hope that progress was being made, but the lack of visible action afterward left people wondering whether something had stalled behind the scenes. Did investigators hit a dead end? Are they still building a larger case? Or is the truth simply more complicated than anyone outside the investigation realizes? Those questions continue to linger. And for the public watching from the outside, the pattern has begun to feel painfully familiar. A moment of momentum, a surge of attention, and then silence once again. David buys the cadaver bag Celeste was found in. For many people following the case, one detail stands out as one of the most disturbing and confusing elements of the entire investigation. When Celeste's body was discovered in the frunk of the black Tesla connected to D4VD, reports indicated that her remains had been placed inside cadaver bags. That detail alone immediately raised an enormous question. Cadaver bags are not ordinary household items. They are not something people casually keep around. They are specialized bags typically used by medical examiners, forensic teams, and emergency personnel for transporting human remains. Which leads to the question that many observers cannot stop asking: where did those bags come from? Someone had to obtain them. Someone had to purchase them, acquire them, or have access to them. In an era where nearly every purchase leaves a digital footprint, online orders, shipping records, credit card transactions, security cameras, and delivery logs, many people find it difficult to understand how that trail has not already been made public. After all, modern investigations can track a person's phone location down to specific streets and buildings. Digital records can reveal where someone traveled, what they searched online, and what they bought. So the idea that something as unusual as cadaver bags could appear in a case like this without an obvious explanation has left many people stunned. If the bags were purchased online, there would likely be records. If they were bought in person, there could be cameras. If they were obtained through professional channels, that could potentially be traced as well. Yet months later, the public still has no clear answers about how they entered the picture. That absence of information has become one of the most frustrating parts of the entire story. Because every unanswered question leads to another. Who acquired the bags? When were they obtained? And why were they needed in the first place? These questions sit at the center of the mystery, and until they are answered, the weight of uncertainty surrounding Celeste's death continues to grow. Every unresolved case carries emotional gravity, but when disturbing details emerge without explanation, the pressure only intensifies. People want to understand. People want the truth. And above all, they want to know how something so horrifying could happen without clear answers following close behind. When even federal involvement doesn't bring answers. Months ago, another rumor began circulating around the case, one that caught the attention of many people closely following the investigation. Some reports and online discussions suggested that the Federal Bureau of Investigation may have taken over or become heavily involved in the case. If true, that would normally signal a major development. The FBI typically becomes involved in investigations when cases cross state lines, involve complex digital evidence, organized activity, or require federal-level forensic resources. Their involvement often brings more investigators, more technology, and more experience to the table. So when people began hearing that the FBI might be involved, many assumed the case was about to move forward quickly. But months later, from the public's perspective, it still feels like nothing has happened. No major arrests, no public charges, no definitive answers. And that has led many observers to begin asking an uncomfortable question. Why does it feel like the justice system is failing here? For families and communities waiting for answers, time can feel like the enemy. Every passing month without visible progress can make it seem as though the system meant to deliver justice has stalled. But the reality of major investigations is often far more complicated than it appears from the outside. When federal agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation become involved, cases can actually become more methodical and deliberate. Investigators may be building a large body of evidence behind the scenes, collecting phone records, financial data, surveillance footage, digital communications, and forensic analysis that could take months or even years to fully process. In many high-profile cases, authorities intentionally remain silent while they construct a case strong enough to survive in court. Because if prosecutors move too early, without airtight evidence, a suspect could walk free permanently. Still, that explanation does little to ease the frustration people feel when a case involving a young life lost appears stuck in limbo. To the public, it looks like a system that should be moving faster. To investigators, it may be a system moving carefully to ensure that when justice finally arrives, it cannot be undone. But until that day comes, the same question will continue echoing through every discussion about the case. If even federal investigators are involved, why does it still feel like nothing is happening? Thank you for staying with us until the end. These stories deserve to be remembered and told with care. If this episode moved you, please consider hitting like and subscribing. It's a small action that helps keep these voices from fading into silence. Until next time, listen closely. The whispers are never truly gone.